He stood on a chair like some half-baked revolutionary, one hand raised, the other gripping a cold brew he probably didn't even like. "I'm in charge now," he declared, loud enough to make the forks pause midair. "And starting today, we clean house. Dead weight goes first." Then his finger found me. "You," he said, smirking. "Kelly. You're out. Hand over everything. Keys, badge, laptop." Effective immediately. Laughter rippled through the cafeteria. Awkward, unsure, the kind that smells like fear. Half the office stared at their trays. The other half waited to see if I'd cry. I didn't. 11 years of service, 37 projects, 3 restructures. I'd survived them all. And now this boy, my late boss's son, thought humiliating me was how you lead. He had his father's eyes, but none of his spine. I stood slowly, the chair scraping against the floor like a warning. My coffee was still warm. I took one last sip, savoring it, because when everything collapses, it's always over something small and simple. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a small ring of keys. 6 in total, dull silver, nothing special. Except they were. They were the company's skeleton keys. Digital access tokens, server rooms, legal archives, physical storage. My boss, the real one, his father had once said, "You're the last line of defense, Kelly. If anything ever happens, these will keep us standing." I held them up, and the room fell quiet. "Good luck," I said, then placed them gently in the new CEO's hand. His grin widened like he'd just conquered Rome. "That'll do," he said, waving me off. "Security will escort you out." Security didn't move. I walked out myself, past the gawking interns, past the motivational poster that read, "Integrity first." I didn't look back, not once. If I had, they would have seen the smile I was trying to hide. Outside, the air tasted like metal and freedom. I sat in my car for a long while, listening to the hum of the parking lot lights, keys no longer clinking in my bag. My hands were trembling, not with fear, but release. He thought those keys were symbols of control. What he didn't know was that they were control. Not because they opened doors, but because they authenticated systems. Mine. His father had trusted me with operational custody, compliance filings, infrastructure renewals, system access. My name was on the paperwork, not his, not HR's, mine. By firing me without due process, he'd pulled a plug he didn't even know existed. But here's the thing. When someone humiliates you in public, when they make a show of your downfall, the instinct is to strike back fast. I didn't. That's the part people never expect. I didn't yell, didn't send an email, didn't post a cryptic LinkedIn status about new opportunities. I just waited. You don't destroy an empire by swinging. You let it rot from the inside, quietly as it forgets who kept the lights on. By 2 p.m., I was at a diner a few blocks away, staring into a mug of burnt coffee. My phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from the office, 1 from the facilities manager, 2 from IT. I ignored them. Then a text came through from Julia, the office administrator. "What did you do, Kelly?" "The badge readers are down. No one can get into the building. IT says all system authorizations expired this morning under your credentials." I read it twice. Smiled. Took another sip. Because that's what he never understood. Companies don't run on titles. They run on people like me. The quiet ones who remember the logins, who file the compliance renewals, who know that servers don't reboot themselves. And when you fire the person who holds the keys, the system doesn't revolt. It just stops obeying. I paid the bill, left a tip, and walked out into the crisp afternoon air. Across the street, I could already picture it. Employees locked outside, phones buzzing, panic spreading like wildfire. Somewhere in that glass tower, the new boss was probably shouting orders no one could execute. He thought firing me made him powerful. But power doesn't come from standing on a cafeteria table. It comes from the quiet knowledge that every structure, every login, every signature has a backbone, and that backbone just walked away. As I got into my car, another text arrived. This one from Thomas, the company lawyer. Kelly, please tell me this is a misunderstanding. Did you really hand him the master keys? The legal ones? I could almost hear his voice cracking through the words. I typed back, he asked for all company property. I complied. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a message. Oh my God. You did what? I put the phone down and started the engine. The hum of the motor filled the silence. For the first time in 11 years, I wasn't responsible for saving anyone else's mess. The keys were gone. The locks were still mine. And the story, well, it was just beginning. By morning, my phone looked like a crime scene. 18 missed calls, 9 voicemails, 5 texts from unknown numbers. The first voicemail was Julia again. Kelly, please, just call me back. No one can access the payroll system. The CFO's losing it. IT says your credentials are still listed as primary authorization. We can't even print badges. The second was Thomas, the company lawyer. He sounded less like the calm, confident man who used to quote policy and more like someone trying to defuse a bomb. Kelly, I don't know what happened yesterday, but if you gave him the physical keys, those were, well, they were part of a legally bound compliance framework. We need to talk. I deleted the rest. I already knew what they'd say. Panic had started knocking. I brewed coffee, fed my cat, and sat by the window as the world outside turned gold with sunrise. I should have felt guilty, but I didn't break anything. They did. I had always been the patch, the fix, the one who caught what everyone else ignored. Without the patch, the cracks were just finally showing. By 9 a.m., my old team couldn't even access their emails. A friend from facilities texted me. They're locked out. Entire East Wing. Even the delivery trucks can't unload 10 minutes later. Spencer's pacing the lobby. He's saying you sabotaged us. Is that true? I typed back, no sabotage. Just policy. He didn't reply. At 9:47, Thomas finally reached me. Kelly, he said, voice taut. You understand what those keys represented, right? I do, I said, sipping my coffee. He sighed, a long exhale that sounded like regret. Then you know firing you publicly without documentation means the custodial authority never transitioned. You're still listed as the company's compliance custodian on federal filings. That means, I finished for him. Any action taken under those systems since yesterday is technically unauthorized. He was silent, then a whisper. Jesus Christ. I didn't say anything. Look, he said finally, I need you to come in. Help us fix this before the board finds out. I don't work there anymore, Thomas. Your new CEO made that clear. This isn't about pride, Kelly. This is about liability. I handed him the keys, I said. He wanted control. He's got it. The line went quiet. I could almost hear the moment he realized what that meant. Around noon, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Clara, the HR manager who'd been too afraid to meet my eyes during the firing. They're saying you locked us out on purpose. The founder's son called an emergency meeting. Legal's furious. Half the systems are down and Spencer keeps yelling, just reset it. He doesn't understand nothing can be reset without your verification. I stared at the screen, shaking my head. This wasn't revenge. It was negligence catching up. You can't run a company like a playground and expect the swings not to fall apart. Still, I couldn't help picturing it. The son, standing in his designer suit, shouting orders to engineers who couldn't even log into their dashboards. Power without knowledge is just noise. By 1 p.m., the damage had spread. The vendor portal locked due to expired credentials. The badge system flagged an unauthorized custodian alert. Payroll froze automatically to prevent fraud. And all of it, every jammed door, every rejected login, traced back to one missing name. Mine. The boardroom must have been chaos. Later, I'd learned that Thomas stormed in mid-meeting, waving a stack of compliance reports and yelling, "You fired the custodian." But that would come later. For now, I sat in my apartment surrounded by 11 years of memories. Conference badges, framed project awards, the engraved pen the founder once gave me. He'd trusted me, taught me that real leadership wasn't about making noise. It was about making things work. His son never learned that. I opened my laptop, half expecting an angry email or a legal threat. Instead, there was one unread message in my personal inbox. From Dana, COO of a rival firm I'd met at an industry conference 3 years back. Heard about what happened. We've been trying to understand how your old company ran so smoothly. Maybe now's the time to talk? I didn't respond yet, but something in me stirred. The part that remembered what it felt like to build something without being stepped on. At 3 p.m., another message came, this one short and frantic. "Kelly, the board wants answers. Spencer told them you refused to cooperate. Thomas just yelled in front of everyone. He said, 'You did what?' 'You fired the legal custodian.'" I stared at that line for a long time. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was inevitability. The kind that comes after years of being underestimated. They'd built their castle on paperwork I had signed, and yesterday they'd torn out the cornerstone. When the sun started to set, I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. My cat jumped into my lap purring, oblivious to the fact that somewhere downtown, a young man's empire was unraveling by the minute. I whispered to her, "Funny thing about power, huh? It only works if you know where the switches are." And in that quiet apartment, with my phone still buzzing in the distance, I realized something. For the first time in over a decade, I didn't owe them a single fix. By the next morning, every major department was in crisis mode. Payroll couldn't run. Vendors couldn't deliver. The IT servers rejected admin logins like they were counterfeit coins. And in the center of it all sat Spencer, the new CEO, with a blank look that said he was finally realizing leadership wasn't about giving speeches. I wasn't there to see it, of course, but I heard everything through a friend who worked in finance. Marcus. He'd always been good at staying invisible, which meant people forgot he was in the room. According to him, it started at 8:32 a.m. sharp. The boardroom was packed. Legal, HR, finance, and operations. Everyone except me. Spencer strutted in late, still wearing that same expensive suit from the day before, though it looked less tailored now, rumpled from a night without sleep. He tossed his phone on the table and said, "All right, let's sort this out. Someone just reset the systems or whatever." The lawyer, Thomas, didn't even sit down. He slammed a folder onto the table. "You can't just reset the systems," he snapped. "You fired Kelly without offboarding her. She was the registered compliance custodian, the one person legally authorized to manage infrastructure access and vendor credentials." Spencer frowned. "She was just an operations manager." "No," Thomas said, voice rising. "She was the operations manager, facilities lead, and legal custodian of record. She's listed on every federal compliance document your father signed. Her digital signature validates your internal contracts." The CFO looked pale. "Are you saying the systems are locked because, what, she's gone?" Thomas nodded. "Exactly that." There was a long silence, the kind that stretches until it feels like gravity's been turned off. Then Spencer scoffed. "Fine. We'll just update the filings. Make Bryce the new custodian or something, Bryce. The IT guy who once thought VPN meant video party network. Shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That's not how it works," he muttered. "Those credentials are cryptographically bound. You need her biometric verification or an official offboarding certificate. We don't have either." That's when Thomas exploded. "You did what? You fired her publicly, without HR present, without paperwork, without a transition form? Are you insane?" Marcus told me the whole room froze. Even HR looked like they'd swallowed glass. Spencer tried to recover, fumbling for authority. She was dead weight. I was making a statement. My father always said leadership requires decisive action. Thomas leaned forward, face red. Your father also said leadership requires intelligence. You've just made this company non-compliant with half our vendors and in breach of at least 4 government contracts. The COO rubbed her temples. We can't process payroll. The vendor accounts are frozen and the building lease still lists her as the transition authority. This isn't just bad optics. It's structural failure. Spencer's voice cracked. You're overreacting. We'll call her, bring her back for an hour, whatever it takes. She's not coming back, Thomas said flatly. You humiliated her in front of the entire staff. She has no obligation to save you now. Meanwhile, I was sitting at a quiet cafe a few blocks away, nursing a latte and pretending not to scroll through the flood of messages from my old colleagues. They're losing it. Spencer's father's been looped in. Legal says half our compliance data is frozen until your credentials transfer. I typed one reply. Tell Thomas I didn't break a thing. The system's just following protocol. Because that was the truth. I hadn't sabotaged them. I'd built those systems with one rule. No one gets power without accountability. It wasn't revenge. It was architecture. Back in the boardroom, things only got worse. The founder's name popped up on the video screen. Face tired, eyes sharp. He was supposed to be in Europe on sabbatical. Explain, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Spencer tried. Dad, listen. She was slowing things down. I'm trying to modernize. She didn't fit the culture anymore. The founder's jaw clenched. And you fired her publicly? Yes, but without offboarding? HR was going to handle. They didn't. Silence again. Then the founder said something Marcus swore chilled everyone in the room. You fired the foundation. You thought she was furniture, but she was the wiring in the walls. And now the lights are out. By afternoon, Spencer's reign had turned into survival mode. The internal chat logs leaked into my inbox. Payroll pending authorization. Vendor access expired. System administrator not recognized. And one message from Thomas to all executives written in plain language. Until Kelly Sharp is properly offboarded, this company is non-operational. Period. I stared at that line for a long time. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was a quiet kind of justice. The kind that doesn't need revenge to sting. Because when you build something right, even chaos follows the rules. By the next morning, the story had spread beyond the office walls. Word travels fast when chaos has a headline. Founder's son crashes company in 48 hours wasn't trending on social media yet. But it was floating around in group chats, investor circles, and quiet breakfast meetings between people who mattered. I woke up to 3 missed calls from an unfamiliar number and 1 short voicemail. Hi, Kelly. This is Dana Holt from Ellison Partners. We met at the Sustainability Summit a few years back. I heard about your situation. Would you be open to a conversation? No strings, just coffee. Her tone wasn't pitying. It was respectful. I remembered Dana. Sharp mind, no ego. The kind of executive who saw through noise. I texted back, sure, noon at Brookfield Cafe. By 11:50, I was sitting at the corner table, the same one I'd used for working lunches when I still wore my company badge. She arrived on time. Sleek black blazer, hair pulled back, phone off. That alone told me she meant business. Kelly Sharp, she said, shaking my hand. You caused quite the stir. I smiled faintly. I didn't cause anything. I just left. That's what makes it fascinating. She leaned in. You didn't blow anything up, yet the building's still on fire. That takes precision. I built systems, I said quietly. They just forgot how to respect them. She nodded, sipping her coffee. Ellison's been struggling with infrastructure compliance since our expansion. I need someone who knows how to build frameworks that don't fall apart when egos take over. I raised an eyebrow. You offering me a job? Consulting first, she said. You'll have autonomy, Full authority over your department and a contract that protects you from corporate politics. We'll pay you what you're worth. And more importantly, you'll be respected. For a moment, I just stared at her. After everything, the word respected hit harder than the salary. I'll think about it, I said. Dana smiled knowingly. You already have. That afternoon, I walked home through the downtown streets. The air felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing anywhere. My phone buzzed again. This time from Marcus. You need to see this. Attached was a screenshot of an internal company memo accidentally forwarded to a few too many people. Subject: Emergency Board Review. Custodial Transition. Required body: all financial and legal operations remain suspended pending resolution with former custodian Kelly Sharp. Immediate reinstatement recommended by legal. I read it twice. The word reinstatement made me laugh out loud right there on the sidewalk. They weren't trying to save me. They were trying to save themselves. At 4:30 p.m., Thomas called again. His voice was exhausted, worn down by too many meetings and too little progress. Kelly, listen, he said. The board met this morning. The founder's back. Spencer's on thin ice and they're asking me to contact you formally. Formally? I repeated. That's a change. They want to resolve this cleanly. We can compensate you for your time if you come in, transfer the credentials, and sign a transition notice. They'll even issue an apology. I let the silence hang for a beat. Thomas, I'm not angry. But I'm not going back to clean up a mess I didn't make. He hesitated. Kelly, please. The company's days from collapse. Payroll, contracts, everything's... What happens when you fire the person who holds the foundation? I finished softly. There was a pause. Then almost a whisper. He's not ready to lead. We all know that now. I told him that once, I said. He laughed. Thomas sighed. If you ever change your mind, the board will take your call. I won't, I said. But I appreciate that they finally understand what my job was worth. That night, I drafted my reply to Dana. Short, clear. I'm in. Let's build something that doesn't need saving. She replied within minutes. Welcome aboard. Orientation Monday. We'll have your office ready. I sat back in my chair, staring at the glow of the city through my window. The skyline looked different now. Still ruthless, but honest about it. For the first time in years, I wasn't just part of someone else's empire. I was about to build my own. Before heading to bed, I checked my messages one last time. The last unread one was from an unknown number. This is Spencer. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long time, then hit delete. Because some lessons can't be taught. They have to be lived. And his education was just beginning. By Monday morning, the fallout had reached the press. Not the front page, yet. But industry blogs were circling like vultures. Words like compliance breach and vendor suspension started appearing next to the company's name. And that was before the founder called an emergency meeting. I didn't attend it, of course, but Thomas later told me everything. The founder arrived unannounced, straight from the airport. No bodyguards, no entourage. Just a man with decades of experience and a face that had seen too many mistakes to pretend anymore. He walked into the glass conference room, dropped his coat on the table, and said quietly, "Tell me it's not as bad as it looks." No one answered. Spencer was there too. Pale, sleepless, and cornered. His usual bravado had drained out, replaced by the twitchy panic of someone who'd run out of stories to tell. He tried to start with a presentation. Charts, projections, excuses, but the founder cut him off. "Save it," he said. "I want to know how you managed to turn a stable company into a legal disaster in less than a week." Spencer stammered, "Dad, she set me up." Kelly knew exactly what those keys were, for Thomas snapped. "She didn't set you up, Spencer. She did her job. You're the one who fired her without protocol. You humiliated the only person who understood how this place worked." The founder leaned back, arms crossed. You fired the custodian? Yes, Thomas said, and didn't file the paperwork. Which means every contract, every vendor agreement, every infrastructure system is legally frozen until we can complete a verified transition. And can we? Thomas shook his head. Not without her authorization. Silence filled the room. Then the founder said, almost to himself, You fired the foundation. Meanwhile, I was in my new office across town. Temporary, modest, but mine. Dana had insisted on getting me started immediately. Let's make sure we're ready when the phones start ringing, she'd said. She wasn't wrong. By noon, 3 clients from my old company had already reached out quietly, asking if I'd consider consulting for them instead. They didn't want drama. They wanted stability, something I'd always given them long before anyone noticed. I was reading through the first proposal when my phone rang again. Thomas. Kelly, he said, voice low. It's happening right now. The founder's in the room. Spencer's trying to blame you? I sighed. He's always needed someone else to take the fall. He's running out of people, Thomas said. The founder just asked to see the original lease. Guess whose name is still on it as transition authority? I smiled faintly. Let me guess. Yours, he confirmed. And when he saw it, he turned white. He asked Spencer if he even knew what that clause meant. Spencer said, It's just a signature. The founder nearly lost it. I pictured the scene. Spencer shrinking in his chair while the man who built the company realized his own son had gutted it through arrogance. What happens now? I asked. The founder's done protecting him. They're calling an emergency board vote this afternoon by 3 p.m. A message popped into my inbox. Subject: Leadership transition announcement. Body: effective immediately, Spencer Rowe has resigned from his position as CEO. Interim leadership will be overseen by the founder until further notice. No explanations, no apology. Just a quiet surrender typed in corporate language. I stared at the email for a while. I should have felt triumphant, but I didn't. It wasn't victory. It was validation. Proof that decency and diligence still had weight in a world obsessed with speed and ego. I closed the laptop and went to the window. Across the street, the company building looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. The once bustling lobby was half empty, a few employees trickling out carrying boxes. The empire had crumbled, not with fire, but with silence. That evening, I met Dana at a rooftop bar to celebrate the first official contract under my new firm. She raised her glass. To clean exits and fresh starts, she said. I clinked mine against hers. And to people who read what they sign. She laughed. So, what now? Now, I said, we build something sustainable. No shouting in cafeterias, no trust fund revolutions, just real work. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I ignored it, but the voicemail that followed played automatically. It was Spencer. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Kelly, I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought I was proving something. Please, can we talk? I deleted it. Some lessons are earned the hard way, and his tuition had already been paid in full. When I got home, I placed my old keyring on the kitchen table, the same one I'd handed him that day. The metal caught the light, dull but still solid, proof that sometimes the smallest things carry the most weight. I thought of the founder, of Thomas, of every person who'd watched and stayed silent while arrogance took over. Maybe now they'd remember that titles don't make you powerful. Responsibility does. The world outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm. I poured a glass of wine, raised it toward the window and whispered, "Here's to the ones who keep the lights on." Because in the end, revenge wasn't the goal. It never was. It was about being seen. And now, finally, they saw.